Picture the future for a moment. Like, if you close your eyes right now and try to imagine human advancement, say, 2 centuries from now, your brain almost certainly defaults to a very specific, um, metallic kind of aesthetic, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's always like gleaming chrome skylines, silent maglev trains, microchips everywhere.
Exactly. It's this very clean, binary progression of the digital age. And I think we find comfort in that vision because, we inherently like things that can be categorized and engineered, things that run on software we can control.
Right, things that are predictable.
Yeah. But then you step into the world we are exploring today, and that entire mechanical vision is just completely upended. We're looking at a landscape that isn't engineered in the traditional sense at all. It's profoundly, almost unsettlingly organic.
Unsettling is definitely the right word for it.
You are looking at a society where the infrastructure literally breathes.
Yeah.
So today we are diving deep into a world set roughly 211 years in the future, pulling from excerpts of a draft script for a show called Suveron.
Specifically, we're looking at episode 4.08, which is titled Quiet.
Right. And at this point in the timeline, the corporate and government suppression of these organic technologies, which they called kiths, that suppression has completely ended.
Yeah, they are totally out in the open now, just fully integrated into everyday life.
Which is fascinating on its own. But our mission for today's deep dive isn't just to marvel at the world building. We are tracing a very specific, honestly chilling psychological arc. We are going to analyze a pair of enigmatic figures known as the Avens, and we're doing it strictly through the eyes of the rural settlement residents they encounter.
And that provides such a brilliant lens for exploring the human condition, because we're observing a community forced to confront something totally inexplicable.
Tracing that emotional journey is just so key here. We watch them initially process these Avens as like just odd outsiders, and then they rapidly shift to viewing them as these unsettling protectors before finally and tragically completely fearing their influence.
It really is a masterclass in how human psychology handles a crisis. Because when survival is threatened, gratitude turns into suspicion incredibly fast.
It really does.
Yeah.
So to understand why a community eventually turns on someone, we first have to establish their baseline of normalcy. You can't fully grasp the terror of a disruption until you understand the profound peace that was disrupted in the first place.
Right, you need to know what normal looks like.
Exactly. And the settlement in this script is far removed from the bustling hubs of this future society. It's nestled in this wide bowl of land between two ridges, and the homes here, these kiths, they haven't been built by construction crews. They have literally been grown into the landscape over years.
The physical integration with the environment is just absolute. The script details kiths that are nestled so deeply into the hillsides that they're effectively half buried.
Like hobbit holes almost, but alive.
Yeah, but biological. While others sit out in the open and their walls have been significantly thickened by, decades of continuous growth, vines and root systems are naturally woven into the older structures.
It's practically geological at this point.
It really is. And the roughly 50 people living here exist in this deep, quiet symbiosis with the structures. It's a whole ecosystem with dirt paths, fire pits, gardens. They even have kith vehicles grazing in a paddock because the technology requires sustenance. It actually eats.
Which is wild to think about. When I was trying to conceptualize what it would actually feel like to live there, the closest real-world equivalent I could come up with was a coral reef.
Oh, I like that. A coral reef.
Right. Because the residents aren't just utilizing tools, and they definitely aren't living in inert boxes of wood and drywall. They exist inside a giant, interconnected breathing organism. The walls of their homes emit this soft, steady hum and an ambient amber light.
Right, they are completely enveloped by it.
And if you spend your entire life navigating the rhythms of a coral reef, you become hyper-attuned to every subtle shift. You just intuitively know the water temperature, the currents. And because your survival depends on that symbiosis, you develop a sensory baseline that instantly detects when a strange, unnatural entity enters your territory.
That is such a crucial point. The arrival of an outsider into a highly calibrated ecosystem like that is never just a trivial event. It registers as a biological anomaly.
Exactly.
And the narrative masterfully highlights this by contrasting two very different arrivals on the exact same day. So, first, we are introduced to a man named Nil.
Right, no.
He's 52 years old, heavily built, long gray streaked hair, loose clothing. He carries a simple canvas bag. But what really stands out about Nil is that he acts entirely natural.
Yeah, he has the posture of someone who just understands the rhythm of the world and expects to be a part of it.
Exactly. He walks into the settlement, hands visible, bag carried low, and just heads straight for the central fire to sit on a log. The local children simply nod at him. He fits the ecosystem perfectly.
Totally normal traveler.
Mhm.
But then we have the Avon who is following him. This Avon is a man in his 30s, and the text explicitly goes out of its way to describe his face and clothing as aggressively unremarkable.
He is the absolute epitome of average build brown hair.
Yeah, and before they even reach this settlement, we see the terrifying extent of this Avon's camouflage. There's this scene at a rural crossroads where the Avon stands directly in Nil's sightline, literally mere feet away, and slowly waves a hand across his own face.
And Nil doesn't flinch.
He doesn't track the movement at all. He looks completely through him. It's so creepy.
The mechanics of this camouflage are just fascinating because, to be clear, we aren't dealing with a sci-fi cloaking device here. The Avon is exerting a profound psychological pressure on the cognitive processes of the people around him.
Wait, so he's basically hacking their brains.
Essentially, yes. Human vision is incredibly selective, right? The
Yeah.
brain only actively processes a tiny fraction of the visual data the eyes receive. It basically hallucinates the rest based on context and expectation.
Right, to conserve cognitive energy.
Exactly. It filters out anything deemed non-threatening or irrelevant. So the Avon has seemingly mastered the ability to hack that specific cognitive filter. He actively forces the brains of observers to just categorize him as background static.
Which we see play out at that crowded roadside inn earlier in the week. The Avon walks into this busy common room, and the script notes that people do glance at him, which is a normal reflex to movement, but the glances fail to hold.
Their eyes physically slide off his form within a second.
Yeah, the young woman serving stew completely ignores him when he sits directly across the table from Nil.
Yeah.
It's like their brains just refuse to render his existence.
And it goes even deeper than that, because the camouflage extends beyond psychological manipulation into this deep, autonomic physical conditioning.
Oh, right, the proprioception thing.
Yes. When Nil inadvertently walks too close to the Avon at the crossroads, the Avon's body executes this microscopic, involuntary correction to remove itself from Nil's path.
Yeah, he doesn't even think about it.
He doesn't. The text specifies he didn't consciously decide to step aside. His body simply did it. His awareness of his body in space is so highly trained that it automatically acts to erase its own presence and avoid any physical friction with the world. He is literally a ghost crafted from flesh and bone.
He spends an entire week tracking Nil like this, sleeping in the dirt, just completely untracked by society. But then, the moment they arrive at the edge of our coral reef, the settlement, that perfect invisibility, actually fractures.
Which is a huge moment.
It is. Nil walks down the path, but the Avon hangs back, half hidden in the trees overlooking the bowl. Almost instantly, a resident named Vess, a guy in his 40s, working in a garden bed, he stops what he's doing. He watches Nil arrive, but then his gaze shifts to the tree line.
He spots the oven.
He spots him. Fess wipes his hands on his trousers and immediately walks toward the trees to confront him. And I have to admit, when I first read this, I really questioned the Avon's competence. Like, if he possesses this god-tier ability to hack human perception, why is he immediately detected by some middle-aged gardener?
Right. Did his technique just fail?
Yeah, is he slipping up?
It's so easy to view that as a failure of his training, but it's actually a profound testament to the altered cognitive state of the settlement residents.
Oh, because of the coral reef analogy.
Exactly. The people here are deeply rooted in a biological symbiosis with their environment. Their situational awareness operates on a fundamentally different frequency than, say, a transient traveler at an inn.
Because a traveler is just focused on getting food, finding a bed.
Right, their baseline is transition. That makes them susceptible to the Avon's cognitive bypass. But Vess is cultivating a living garden within a larger breathing ecosystem. His baseline relies on sustained, deep observation of complex biological patterns.
So his brain isn't filtering out the background. His brain is actively monitoring the background for anomalies.
Precisely. Because Vess is so attuned to the holistic health of his environment, his cognitive filters don't discard the Avon as irrelevant static. The script even notes that the settlement's attention, quote, slides off him slightly less than it does for most people, but it holds.
Wow.
For the first time in a week, the Avon experiences the profound disorientation of being truly seen. His specialized camouflage is basically catching on the dense, interconnected fabric of this specific community.
So, forced out of the shadows, the Avon enters the settlement. He walks down to sit on a log near the fire, away from Nil. And this initiates what we can call the outsider phase for the residents. They don't fear him yet.
Right, he's just an unusual variable that they need to categorize.
Yeah. And he tries to manually construct the camouflage that usually happens automatically. He tries to be useful. He helps a guy carry a heavy load of firewood over to one of the kiths. They have a standard, mundane exchange of pleasantries.
The man asks for a name, the Avon gives a generic fake one, and it concludes without incident.
He's just trying to mimic a benign traveler. But then Rin, the community elder, a woman in her 70s, she demonstrates this really sharp intuition. She comes out of her kith, hands Nil a hot drink, and then deliberately brings a second cup over to the Avon.
And she sits beside him.
Right. And there's this brilliant, understated moment where she looks at him for a moment longer than is strictly polite. You can tell something unseen registers within her, but she eventually looks away.
That extended glance speaks volumes about frontier sociology. Rin is hospitable. She's adhering to the social contract of offering a traveler warmth, but her survival instincts are fully engaged.
She detects an otherness about him.
Yes. It might be his preternatural stillness or his lack of wasted movement or maybe the intense hidden focus he keeps on Nil. Yet, she accepts his presence. In an isolated place, you don't banish someone into the wilderness just because they have a weird vibe.
True. And we see that dynamic again later when the Avon tries to talk to Rin while she's shelling peas on her porch. He approaches, sits nearby. Again, the text highlights his intense stillness. He doesn't fidget at all.
He is simply wholly present.
Yeah. Rin asks him if he's traveling far. He thinks about it and honestly replies that he doesn't know. Rin processes this, then points at Nil and asks, "With him?" And the Avon gives no verbal response. He just absorbs the question in total silence.
Which is a remarkable form of honesty, really.
It is. He doesn't make up some complex cover story about being Nil's brother or a hired guard. He lets the silence be his answer. And Rin respects that boundary. She just nods and goes back to her work.
So at this juncture, the Avon is safely categorized in the collective mind of the settlement. He's a benign enigma, a quiet traveler who does his chores and keeps to himself.
The ecosystem has absorbed the anomaly, but that comfortable categorization is deeply fragile, and it shatters completely as dusk falls. Which brings us to the bear incident.
Oh, this scene is incredible. This is where the residents witness an act that thoroughly defies their understanding of the natural order.
It completely alters their psychological framework of them. And to appreciate the magnitude of this shift, you have to fully grasp the immediate danger here. The scene is very grounded. It's evening, cook fires are crackling, adults are talking about crops. It's that steady, comforting rhythm of a settled community.
And then a sharp shout echoes from the perimeter.
Right. A massive adult black bear has emerged from the woods and stands at the edge of the settlement. And the production notes are super adamant about this context.
Yeah.
Bears in this era have evolved to be highly aggressive and deeply unpredictable.
This isn't just a nuisance bear getting into the trash.
No, this is an immediate, lethal emergency. Everyone needs to seek shelter instantly.
The community reacts with practiced, quiet urgency. Doors are pulled open, kids are physically shoved inside the kiths, the threat level is absolute. And the bear snorts and takes a deliberate step forward into their territory.
And in the midst of this chaotic scramble for survival, the Avon behaves in a way that fundamentally contradicts human instinct. While parents are risking their lives to shield their kids, the Avon stands up from his log.
He doesn't grab a weapon.
He doesn't grab a burning branch from the fire. He doesn't shout to make himself look big. He just begins walking slowly, deliberately, directly toward the apex predator. Hands completely empty.
It's unbelievable.
He stops exactly 20 feet away from the animal. The bear lowers its massive head, watching him, sniffing the air. And then the Avon just sits down.
He just sits down.
He crosses his legs in the dirt path and sits perfectly still. I mean, I found myself rereading this scene 3 times because it breaks every established rule of biological self-preservation.
It really does. It's an overwhelming display of defiance, executed through an act of absolute physical passivity.
Think about the energy required to override millions of years of evolutionary panic. If you witness someone attempt to neutralize a charging predator by calmly sitting on the ground and doing absolutely nothing, your brain wouldn't process them as brave.
No, you'd assume they were having a catastrophic psychological break.
Right, or that they wielded a form of power so far beyond your comprehension that the normal rules of physics and biology just no longer applied to them.
And the residents are experiencing exactly that cognitive dissonance. The narrative slows down drastically here to emphasize the tension. The settlement collectively holds its breath. The bear takes another agonizingly slow step forward.
It's so tense.
It stops. It sniffs again. A long, silent beat passes. And the bear physically sways, like its instincts are clearly short-circuiting. It looks past the Avon toward the vulnerable people, then snaps its attention back to the seated man.
It just cannot reconcile the complete absence of fear or aggression with the presence of prey.
Exactly. And finally, the bear simply turns around and walks back into the darkness of the trees.
And the Avon doesn't celebrate. He doesn't even move right away. He stays seated in the dirt for another full minute, just ensuring the threat has truly dissipated before quietly standing up and walking back to his spot at the communal fire.
If we analyze the profound impact this has on the resident psychology, we see a community whose entire worldview is predicated on a respectful physical symbiosis with nature. They know predators operate on physical dominance and violence.
Yeah, that's the rule of the woods.
But the Avon just exerted a sheer invisible force of will to dominate the natural order. He overrode the apex predator without lifting a single finger. So to Vis, who's standing there completely paralyzed with his mouth open, this quirky traveler has instantly transmuted into an entity bordering on the supernatural.
He's basically a wizard to them now.
Yeah.
But the brilliance of the writing is this deeply grounded physical detail that anchors this entire psychological turn.
Oh, the hands.
The hands. The Avon returns to his log, picks up his bowl of food, and a young man standing nearby points a trembling finger and says aloud, "His hands! Look at his hands." The Avon's hands are shaking violently. He can barely hold the bowl.
That singular detail of the shaking hands is the exact pivot point where awe transitions into deep, unsettling fear.
Why is that?
Consider the alternative. If the Avon had simply returned, calmly picked up his spoon, and eaten his meal with a steady hand, the residents might have deified him.
They would have worshipped him as a god.
Right. They would view him as a flawless protector, a being devoid of human frailty whose actions follow a divine, predictable logic.
But the shaking hands prove he isn't a god. They prove he's profoundly mortal and that he was absolutely terrified while sitting in the dirt. And that is infinitely more terrifying to the residents.
Exactly. He felt the exact same paralyzing human terror they did, yet he still possessed the inexplicable capacity to mentally dominate the bear. It makes him an intensely unpredictable variable.
Because he's wielding this immense invisible force, but he's operating under volatile human emotion.
Yes. The residents realize they're harboring an entity whose capabilities they can't measure and whose rules of engagement they can't see. And the tension at the fire pit shifts. Nil, the man the Avon has been tracking all week, he finally looks directly at the Avon for the first time.
Holds his gaze briefly, then looks away.
And Rin watches this silent exchange of power dynamics. She recognizes that a massive invisible game is being played out in her home, and she does not know the rules.
And the real tragedy here is that the unease from the bear incident is merely the prologue. Because the bear, terrifying as it was a known entity. What ultimately breaks the psychological foundation of this community happens hours later, in the dead of night.
The blackout.
Yes. When the very walls protecting them from that wilderness suddenly and inexplicably betray them. The settlement's lifeline experiences a catastrophic failure, and human nature violently demands a scapegoat.
The shift from viewing him as an unsettling protector to a lethal threat is executed through sheer visceral horror. The script takes us into the intimate space of Rin's kith late at night. The Avon is asleep in an alcove. The living structure is functioning normally. Its warm, amber glow, slow, rhythmic thrum of its heartbeat.
And then, without warning, the amber light begins to dim. It's not like a light bulb going out. It reads like a biological fading.
Like necrosis, the thrumming heartbeat stutters and slows. The Avon is still asleep as the light dims further. Finally, the thrum stops completely. The amber light extinguishes. The kith is plunged into total darkness.
The living structure is just dead.
And this rapid necrosis isn't isolated to Rin's home. It's sweeping across the entire settlement simultaneously.
The Avon wakes up in the silence. He navigates the dark space, feels his way to the entryway, and walks outside. And the script provides this chilling mechanical detail about these organic structures. Kiths default to open when they go quiet. Their doors literally unlatch and swing wide open to the night.
Think about the profound psychological violation that represents.
I mean, think about the muscle memory in your own home right now. When you wake up at 3 in the morning, you reach for a light switch without thinking. You implicitly trust the structural integrity of your locks.
Right. If the modern power grid fails, electronic locks are designed to fail securely, keeping you sealed inside.
Exactly. But imagine the sheer cognitive dissonance, the absolute loss of security. If the moment the power cut out, every single door and window in your home swung wide open, exposing you completely to the dark woods outside. Your sanctuary instantly becomes a trap.
And the emotional response from the community is just harrowing. From the outside, the dead kiths look like ordinary, cold buildings stripped of their warmth. The residents start emerging into the night. And it isn't an immediate stampede of panic.
It's more like a heavy denial.
Yes, people are moving sluggishly, acting on decades of ingrained muscle memory, desperately hoping it's just a temporary biological glitch. We observe Dero, this 80-year-old man who has lived in his specific kith for over 40 years.
Oh, this part broke my heart.
He stands in his open doorway in his nightclothes, hand pressed flat against the exterior wall. He's whispering to the structure. But the wall is cold and inert. It doesn't respond to his voice or touch anymore. It's akin to watching someone try to rouse a beloved pet that has already passed away.
The grief is everywhere. A mother walks out into the dark carrying her sleepy child, actively forcing her face to remain calm to hide her panic. Vess is fully dressed, moving urgently from structure to structure, doing this grim triage. And the reality is devastating. At least 20 of the kiths are dead.
Half of the settlement's symbiotic partners have suffered rapid, inexplicable necrosis. Their fundamental means of survival has been stripped away in an instant.
So instinctively, they converge at the central fire pit for warmth and security. Someone throws heavy logs on the embers. People are shivering, wrapped in blankets, clutching old oil lamps because the bioluminescence is gone.
And this gathering in the dark is the absolute perfect incubator for mob mentality.
Oh, yeah. Because panic requires a focal point, right? A narrative to make sense of the chaos.
Exactly. Vess is standing in the center, trying to maintain order. When asked about Dero, Vess quietly says the old man refuses to leave his cold wall. And then, a woman named Tem, a resident in her 50s, she voices the question that acts as the spark in the powder keg.
She scans the terrified faces. Her eyes lock onto the Avon. She points directly at him and asks, "Are you the one making the quiet?"
Making the quiet such a devastatingly accurate description of what happened, stripping away life and leaving only absence.
And the young man who had pointed out the Avon's shaking hands earlier immediately seizes on Tem's accusation. He steps forward, voice raised, declaring, "He made the bear go away. He did something to it. I saw him."
The atmosphere shatters.
Multiple residents start talking over each other, voices escalating, fingers collectively pointing at the stranger.
Okay.
Now, wait, I was struggling to understand their logic here. The man literally just saved their children from being mauled by an apex predator a few hours ago.
Right.
Why is there immediate instinct to form a lynch mob against the one person who proved he could protect them? It seems entirely counterintuitive to their own survival.
It feels counterintuitive if you view it purely rationally, but it is a flawless depiction of human psychology under existential duress. We've seen this dynamic play out in historical crises, from witch trials to modern periods of social instability. When a community faces an inexplicable disaster, they are compelled to manufacture causality. The bear, while deadly, operated within the bounds of physical reality. They understood the mechanics of a bear attack, but the sudden, silent death of their living homes.
That's an invisible existential threat that defies the laws of their reality.
Exactly. And an invisible threat necessitates a visible target. If you can't fight the disease, you fight the person you believe brought it, and who is the only other invisible, inexplicable anomaly in their environment.
The Avon.
The profound irony is that the very act that categorized him as a savior earlier, his silent exertion of will over the bear, is the exact evidence they use to convict him now. He demonstrated he wields power over biological entities without touching them. Therefore, in their panicked minds, he must be the one remotely shutting down the kiths.
So in times of profound systemic failure, the human mind just rapidly weaponizes the concept of the outsider. We can't tolerate a void of meaning, so we project our terror onto the anomaly.
Yes. The situation is degrading by the second. Vess attempts to intercede, demanding quiet. He turns to the Avon and asks him directly, "Did you do this?" And the script focuses intently on Vess's expression. It notes his face isn't accusing yet, but it is deeply calculating.
The paranoia has firmly taken root in the leadership.
And the Avon hesitates. He has the opportunity to speak, to perhaps point the finger at Nil, whom he's been tracking. But he remains silent. He absorbs the hostility of the crowd without deflecting it.
And of course, the crowd interprets his silence as an admission of guilt. The physical tension reaches a breaking point. Residents are inching closer, posture aggressive. They are inches away from enacting desperate violence. But before the mob can fully ignite, the reality of the situation fractures again.
Yes, introducing a new element that entirely paralyzes them and reveals the terrifying scope of their predicament.
Out of the darkness, a figure slowly ascends the path into the firelight. It is the second Aven.
And the contrast between the first and second Aven is so vital here. The first Aven is a master of erasure. He's trained to make sure human eyes slide off his form, to be a ghost. The second Aven operates on the exact opposite principle.
She is an older, heavily built woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back tightly, and she does not hide. She, quote, asserts her presence slowly.
As she walks calmly into this chaotic gathering, she performs no aggressive actions. Yet the angry residents involuntarily begin taking physical steps backward to clear a path for her.
She just commands the physical space through sheer gravity. She surveys the crowd, her eyes briefly meeting the first Avens. The text notes there's no surprise in their exchange, just this grim acknowledgement of two professionals in the field. Then she slowly turns her head and locks her gaze onto Nil.
And she holds it. Put yourself in the position of Ves or Tem right now. You are moments away from attacking the first Aven, assuming he was a lone monster tormenting your village. Suddenly, another one materializes from the night, and her sheer presence clearly outranks him.
The psychological floor just drops out from beneath them.
The fear deepens exponentially because the anomaly has organized. They realize they aren't dealing with a rogue individual. They are witnessing the sudden manifestation of a system, a hierarchy, an entirely unknown breed of humanity that wields control over reality in ways they can't combat.
And that profound realization of their utter powerlessness silences the mob instantly. The second Aven stops directly in front of Nil. Nil looks up, and his expression shifts not to shock, but to this weary recognition. Without a word, he stands up, slings his canvas bag over his shoulder, and begins walking with her toward a clearing away from the fire.
The first Aven silently falls into step behind them.
And the young man from the settlement tries to take a half step forward to stop them, but Ves immediately clamps a heavy hand onto his shoulder, holding him back. Ves understands survival. He knows they are completely outmatched.
Which leads to the agonizing revelation in the moonlit clearing. The three of them form a triangle. Nil sits heavily on a fallen log. The second Aven sits opposite him, while the first stands quietly to the side. And it's here we finally hear Nil attempt to verbalize his existence.
The dialogue is incredibly painful to read because Nil is struggling to articulate a curse he barely comprehends himself. He gestures vaguely back toward the dark, dead structures and says, I try to walk in the middle. I try to stay away from the edges.
Explaining his desperate attempts to maintain physical distance from the kiths.
Exactly. And then he delivers the line that completely rewrites the reality of the episode. He looks at the Avens and says, I make them quiet. Permanently.
It is the ultimate horrifying twist of the narrative.
I want to make sure the mechanics of this are crystal clear because it completely reframes the entire hour. The first Aven, the man the settlement was fully prepared to murder, had absolutely nothing to do with the blackout. He's completely innocent. The killer was Nil.
Nil. The unassuming 52-year-old traveler who patted dogs and just wanted a hot cup of tea.
So Nil's physiology has basically altered.
Yeah, somehow fundamentally altered. To use a rough analogy, he operates as a localized walking autoimmune trigger for this specific organic architecture. He doesn't want to destroy the kiths. He is deeply traumatized by his own nature.
But his sheer physical proximity causes the cellular communication within the living structures to undergo rapid, irreversible necrosis.
He's a walking biological natural disaster, completely incapable of stopping the rot he spreads simply by existing near them.
Which means our entire understanding of the Avens has been wrong. They aren't assassins plotting against the settlement, and they aren't the source of the plague. They're essentially a walking containment protocol.
They're observers, shepherds tasked with tracking a human anomaly who inadvertently destroys the infrastructure of the New World. They follow him to document his path, maybe calculate the radius of his destructive field, or study how the necrosis spreads.
Wow. And Nil fully comprehends the tragic disparity between his condition and the Aven's abilities. He looks up at the first Aven and says quietly, You made the bear quiet. The Aven simply nods.
Then Nil looks down at his own hands and repeats, I make them quiet. Permanently. He recognizes that while the Aven can temporarily exert control over the chaotic natural world to protect life, Nil's mere presence permanently annihilates the cultivated organic world.
The weight of his guilt is just palpable. He stands up, adjusts his bag, and walks away down the dark path, heading back out into the isolation of the wilderness. He doesn't look back at the settlement.
He cannot look back because he knows the magnitude of the devastation he's inadvertently caused. He accepts his existence requires perpetual exile.
But while Nil walks away, the settlement is left to grapple with the permanent ruins of their lives. The two Avens slowly walk back up the path to the central fire. The majority of the residents are still clustered together in the cold. A small handful of the kiths have begun to emit a faint, unsteady glow as they attempt to recover, but the vast majority are completely inert.
And the script's focus finds Diro again. The old man hasn't moved an inch. He is still standing by the exterior wall of his dead kith, hand pressed flat against the surface.
The text describes the wall generating a faint, almost imperceptible warmth, which quickly fades back to cold. Diro whispers to it again. It warms slightly, teasing a biological response before cooling once more. It is an excruciating sequence.
He's trapped in a horrific purgatory, unable to let go of the hope that his home might resurrect itself.
And Ves, standing near Rin by the fire, watches the two Avens approach the light. He looks at the second Aven, the Authoritor, and asks the only question that matters. Will they come back? Asking if the necrosis is reversible.
And the second Aven does not sugarcoat the reality. She doesn't offer false comfort. She looks at Ves and simply replies, probably not.
The settlement has suffered an amputating blow. 20 living homes, deeply integrated symbiotic partners are permanently dead. The delicate ecological balance that sustained them has been fractured beyond repair. And here is the final brutal psychological reality for the residents. From their perspective, the Avens are undeniably the harbingers of this apocalyptic event.
Absolutely. Because even though Nil was the physical catalyst, the Avens allowed it to happen.
Right. The first Aven tracked Nil right to their doorstep, sat silently by their fire, and knowingly permitted a walking biological weapon to sleep inside Rin's living house. To Ves, to Tem, to everyone shivering in the dark, the Avens are the ones who unleashed the plague.
The residents witness the first Aven dominate a massive predator with a mere look. They know the Avens possess incomprehensible power, yet with all that power, they did absolutely nothing to prevent Nil from rotting half the settlement from the inside out.
In the eyes of the surviving community, the Avens have transformed into terrifying, godlike overlords who view human settlements as acceptable collateral damage in whatever silent observational game they are playing.
The psychological shift is absolute. They moved from viewing the Aven as a quirky outsider to a miraculous savior, to the terrifying architect of their ultimate destruction.
The sheer scope of that arc is stunning. If we trace the exact journey of this community, we really see the fragility of human perception. They began by welcoming an anomaly out of ingrained frontier hospitality, finding his silence odd but acceptable.
Then, they were struck by awe when he manipulated the natural order to save their lives, reclassifying him as a frightening but necessary protector.
And finally, descending into sheer existential panic when their foundational reality died around them, ultimately realizing this strange protector was actually a small cog in a massive hierarchy that knowingly let their world be shattered. The reluctant takeaway for you, listening to this today, lies in reflecting on how rapidly our own minds warp when faced with sudden, inexplicable disaster.
It's so true.
We will gladly suspend our disbelief and accept the impossible when it actively saves us from the proverbial bear. We love a miracle that works in our favor. But the exact second our fundamental systems fail, the moment the infrastructure we trust goes completely dark and the doors swing open to the terrifying unknown, we violently turn on that exact same inexplicable force. We demand causality. We demand a scapegoat because the truth is too much to carry.
Because the alternative truth, accepting that the universe is inherently chaotic, that an unassuming quiet man can simply walk down your street and accidentally annihilate your entire way of life by merely existing, is a reality too horrific for the human mind to process without breaking.
It truly is. Which brings me to a final lingering thought experiment I want to leave you with today. It's rooted deeply in the most heartbreaking image from the script. The old man, Diro.
Oh, man.
Picture Diro standing alone in the pitch dark, shivering in his nightclothes, whispering desperately to a cold, dead wall that used to be a living, breathing partner in his life for 4 decades. The script forces us to watch that wall warm slightly, teasing him with the ghost of a heartbeat, before turning cold again.
It is the ultimate betrayal of a lifelong symbiotic bond.
I want you to think about the infrastructure that houses you tonight. Think about the technology that regulates your temperature, the locks that secure your doors, the walls you trust to keep the wilderness at bay. If that deeply trusted environment suddenly stopped recognizing your existence and went completely, permanently cold, How long would you stand in the doorway, desperately whispering to the walls before you finally accepted the dark?
It is a profoundly haunting question to grapple with, especially as our own daily reliance on increasingly invisible, complex technology grows deeper with every passing year.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Suveron, the architecture of symbiosis, and the terrifying psychology of the unseen. We will catch you on the next one.